I did want to look and I forgot. Cup 6, ranked play, release date.
Okay, so the path to affiliate says 1 now. So that
Nice.
was 1 day.
Yep. What game was before Black Ops 6? Why am I
MW3.
MW3? Yeah. Um, all right. Um, testing 1 2 3 1 2 3.
Testing 1 2 3 1 2 3.
Good on Twitch, YouTube. YouTube sounds fine. Should be good.
All right, you ready to get started?
Yes, sir.
Hello and welcome to episode 208 of the Ego Chall Podcast. My name is Preston Byers, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host Justin Binkowski. And on today's episode, we are talking about ranked play. We finally have a release date for Black Ops 7's competitive game mode. We also have the exact dates of the Esports World Cup and the Call of Duty version of the EWC this year. And then the big thing with today's show is obviously the final week of the Major 1 qualifiers, which are this weekend, and will have a huge determining factor about who actually gets into the winner's bracket and where those teams will be seated, considering how crazy the first 4 weeks have been. But before we get to any of that, how are you doing, Bink?
Yep, doing all right. Um, should be a pretty straightforward episode today. Actually got some news that's nothing crazy, but at least it's something on the news front. And yeah, big topic is these final matches before Major 1, because there are definitely some bangers and definitely ones that should have some massive implications on what the bracket and everything could look like heading into the first land of Black Ops 7. So can't wait.
The biggest thing on the news front really was the ranked play announcement. This happened on Tuesday, January 20th, and it was announced by Treyarch that ranked play will be coming with the arrival of Season 2 in Black Ops 7, which is February 5th. So, about 2 weeks from now, ranked play will be in the game. I want to get your thoughts on this because we talked before Black Ops 7 and we were kind of trying to make a prediction about where ranked play would end up being because it's been all over the map in terms of the recent games when the developers actually put in ranked play. So how do you feel about ranked play coming with Season 2 on February 5th?
Yeah, I think it's I mean it's a pretty loaded question. There's a lot of
Mm-hmm.
ways to approach it, just in the sense that last year ranked play came probably the earliest it has, and I mean it's definitely the earliest in the last 4 titles. But um, the biggest issue last year was uh, the cheating epidemic and the hackers and all that that players had to deal with. Um, and that seemed to derail a lot of the momentum, or oh, excuse me. And it kind of, in my view from the outside looking in, it kind of offset, if you will, you know the positive of rank play coming early, um versus the cheaters and hackers making it almost unplayable by the end of the game's life cycle. And it felt like, early on there were a lot of people trying to push through the hackers and the cheaters and play regardless. Streamers like Havoc and a bunch of others like doing, challenges and whatnot, even Octane and Parasite, like trying, I think Parasite maybe even got rank one split. I know Havoc did, or I'm pretty sure Havoc did, and but by the end of the game, like really the last couple months of Black Ops 6, even after the CDL season and in that limbo period between Black Ops 6 and the launch of Black Ops 7, like nobody was playing ranked. They were all playing different games. This was around like Marvel Rivals time. It felt like a lot of pros were playing that, and when you got people who are invested in competitive Call of Duty and its success, like just leaving Call of Duty in general to not play ranked play and play a different game, that's pretty telling to the issue at hand with the hackers and the cheaters. So um, I think it's kind of in a weird spot where you want rank to be available as early as possible to coincide with the launch of each COD title. At the same time, you don't want it to come early if it's at the detriment of the players, or if there are going to be this plague of hackers and cheaters. So that's the biggest question for me, is how they plan to address that in Black Ops 7, if they have uh, improved countermeasures in Black Ops 7 ranked play, and that's part of the reason why it's taken longer to get it rolling. Then that is a good explanation. But if it's just going to be the same ranked play from Black Ops 6, copy and pasted, and the hackers and cheaters still prevail, then it's like, well, what the hell have we been doing for the last couple months? Why wasn't this just in at launch at that point? So it's a little weird, but in terms of what you were asking, yeah, I just did it before uh, we went live and looked at least at Black Ops 6, MW3, and MW2. This would be, um, if it comes on February 5th, it'd be slightly earlier than MW2's ranked play launch, but it'd be later than MW3 and Black Ops 6's ranked play launch, which that's not taking into account the launch of the game. It's just
Mm-hmm.
from a calendar date, so there could be some slight day discrepancies there, but for lack of digging into it anymore, it is, it feels like we're going backwards a little bit in that sense. But like I said, if it's in terms of taking a step back to hammer away at some of the issues from last year and previous years, try and perfect ranked play and make it playable long term for the rest of Black Ops 7's launch, then that'll be a good thing. But if we see on day one just a ton of hackers and cheaters, it's really going to be, uh, you know, a pretty big blow, and it would honestly just suck, and it wouldn't be surprising to me if, uh, you know, after the initial hype dies down, many people move on from ranked play pretty quickly, maybe even quicker than last year, if the hackers still are around.
Yeah, the most important thing with any ranked play is the quality of the game. It can't be kind of half baked and have all the hackers, obviously, like Black Ops 6 did. But the second biggest thing is that it comes at a time where people are actually paying attention to the game. And February 5th, no matter what they bring in season 2 of Black Ops 7, is not when people are paying attention to Black Ops 7. It's not when people are paying attention to Call of Duty in general. So ranked play needs to be in the game sometime in the first month, or at the very latest by Christmas, because then you get the Christmas noobs, as people like to say. You get all the people that get the game around the holidays. At this point, though, it's already too late. I'm sure if you look at the player count, you can look at the spike that happens around Christmas, or obviously the spike that happens at launch, it quickly dies down. The spike that happens at Christmas, it quickly dies down. We're already almost a month after Christmas. People are done playing this game unless they're really into it, and that does not bode well for ranked play, which is an even smaller subsection of the total player base, which are mostly playing TDM, if I'm not mistaken. I believe that whatever it is, like 65% of people like pretty much never play anything other than TDM because it's the very first thing that you click on when you go into the game. So, I've said this before. I'll continue to say it until I'm dead, that ranked play should be on launch. Like, it makes no sense. I understand people are like, well, we don't know the rules, we don't know the guns. Okay, that's cool. Like, just keep experimenting with it. It's basically having people that are paying to be quality test or whatever they are, quality control testers. You get these people that pay $60-$70 for this game, and then they go into ranked play and they find out which game modes actually work. Maybe we could find a third game mode that is actually better than Overload. If people are just constantly testing these game modes, they can find different guns. Obviously, most of them get GA'd, so it probably wouldn't matter all that much. You might be able to find maps that you otherwise wouldn't think would be viable for competitive, but because you have so many people playing it and testing, essentially, maybe you're able to find a better solution or a more entertaining solution for competitive COD. I understand the hackers bit. I just don't know how much of that actually has to do with when it comes out and like when ranked play comes out versus like if they wait 2 months, if that actually changes much, or if that's just Black Ops 6 anti-cheat was horrible in comparison to some other titles, which is not great either. And it could, I think, eventually lead to competitive being more of a console only thing, which has been something that's been floated in the past, just because that would not completely eliminate hackers, but certainly limit the number of them in competitive. But that's another topic for another day. I'm frustrated. Obviously, I don't know when we predicted before the season when this would come out. I think we both probably said like it has to be in by like season 1 reloaded, which would have been obviously like the beginning of January, late December or whatever, which would have been kind of an ideal time, but instead it's February 5th. That'll be after Major 1. So a little bit of a dead time for competitive because it'll be on the switchover. Maybe that's good. Maybe that's bad. I'm not entirely sure. But yeah, it's coming in about 2 weeks.
That's the one thing I will say is, silver lining here is due to the timing of its release. I mean, it's not going to be great because of the matches kicking off like a week out. I think it's the 13th is the first day of matches, so it'd be like literally 8 days after launch of ranked play. But in theory, we could see some of those maps we've talked about, like Meltdown, Fringe, Standoff, even like potentially tested. I don't think, based on what I've seen, I don't think Standoff or Meltdown would most likely be used for anything other than Search and Destroy, and then Fringe could potentially be in there for multiple modes, but we'll have to wait and see.
Now that I'm thinking about it, probably the best time to bring ranked play in for this season or really any season is right as they go on the break for the holidays, because obviously there will be no COD games so this year the break started December 15th. That was the day after week 2 of the CDL, and then they didn't come back until January 9th. If it releases the second week of December, 2 weeks before Christmas, then you at least have all these pro players, whether they're still in Dallas or wherever their team is, or whether they're at home and they're playing ranked play, they're streaming. That gives them something to do, and obviously more people. I mean, I remember being in high school and watching a lot of Twitch streams during the Christmas break because you have so much more time on your hands than like when you're in school, and then you have whatever the 5 to 11 time period. At least with this, if ranked play came out the second or third week of December, more people could enjoy it, more people could watch it on stream. There is some kind of competitive thing going on in those 3 to 4 weeks where you don't have the CDL. That would also be the time to do tournaments. If we're doing like S&D tournaments, Daniel Say, if you're listening, that would be something to do. but just something to kind of fill the gap between, we've talked about it before, like the break can be very long, especially, when you're trying to do 2 shows a week or whatever we were trying to do. That makes it very difficult to talk about things that are competitive related. But if there's ranked play, if there are streams, there are tournaments, something to fill the gap, I think that would be best for the scene in general, and kind of just, be different than a lot of other esports, which also go on a break around that time. So it's not like COD is any different, but, when the LCS goes on a break, the LCS starts their season in January, right? So,
yeah, it
but
starts this weekend actually.
yeah, so in December, a lot of it is like solo queue and players streaming and stuff as they're getting ready for the season, which is entertaining, especially with new teams and new players. But I'm just trying to spitball, trying to give ideas for the CDL. But yeah, February 5th, Season 2 of Black Ops 7 and Ranked Play will be coming along with it. We also got the dates of the Esports World Cup, obviously happening in Saudi Arabia for, I think this is the third or fourth consecutive year, third year with COD. I don't know if they did it beforehand without COD. But yeah, EWC 2026. It officially begins July 6th, and then it will go until August 23rd, but the Call of Duty portion of the event will be happening in the 5th week of the EWC, and that is August 3rd to August 9th. So, I mean, it's definitely the biggest game happening in that window. You get PUBG Mobile, right, I think, and then I don't even know what KWC is, and then Tekken 8, which is a fighting game. And then Warzone is the week before.
PMWC?
I will look it up. PMWC game. PUBG Mobile World Cup.
Okay. So the PUBG, so it's the PMWC EWC.
Yeah. I don't know what's going on with that. And then the KWC is Honor of Kings, and that is the Honor of Kings World Cup. So the Honor of Kings World Cup, Esports World Cup. Yeah. So, so Call of Duty will be happening in that 5th week, beginning of August. Warzone happens the week before, July 27th to August 2nd. Obviously, if you want to watch the better COD players, watch Warzone, right? And I think that's good. When is COD Champs this year? Because we've obviously talked about it before, like how there is that break in between Champs and EWC, and we've seen quite a few roster change happen in that. So COD Champs this year ends July 19th. So that's about 2 weeks. So we probably will see some roster changes, I imagine, especially for teams that don't make it to Champs, especially because Major 4, where that'll be the final stop for 4 teams, that will be June 28th. So they'll have 6 weeks or so, 6-7 weeks between Major 4, and so there will be some roster changes, definitely. Like, no way that these teams are sticking for 6-7 weeks after not even finishing in the top 8 of the CDL. So what do you think about this? Do you think they should push it up at all, or like should it be pushed back? Because obviously that's been talked about before, about like there's obviously just nothing happening for Call of Duty like in September or whatever, should it stay in that early August window?
I think for this year, I think last year maybe it was 3 weeks between Champs and EWC. So I'd like to just see. I mean, that's the big way of looking at EWC, in my opinion. Is it's really their opportunity to test things, and like last year was the allowing coaches on stage during matches, right? Like they've at least shown the willingness to experiment with some things game wise and schedule wise. I think you have that flexibility as well to see what works best. I mean, unless EWC like lengthened how long it goes, like if it's July or August, you can't really do anything about that and be like, oh, we want it in September. So, I think for what it is, I think it's fine. It will. I mean, the big question will be when does the next Call of Duty game get launched. If it's like November again, then we're gonna be in for another long off season, which will suck for the Ego Chall podcast. But um, it is what it is, and we'll cross that bridge when we get there. But yeah, I think um, part of the thing with EWC, and it could just be my opinion on it, and there could be other competitive fans who think differently about the tournament. I know there are because with Optic winning, there were people like saying like, does this count as a ring and all that stuff through the prize
Mm-hmm.
pool, yada yada. But like, it's really like a supplementary tournament in my opinion. Like champs will always be the big one and the one that means the most in my opinion. But when the prize pool is there for EWC, it obviously still does mean a lot to the players and their,
Yeah.
their ability to make an income. So, um, I think having it somewhat closer to the end of the CDL season is good for the players. I do think it's also probably better for the fans in terms of retaining their attention because there most likely are a ton of fans who are just like, yeah, COD Champs is over, the season's over. Now it's more like, oh wait, there's still this $1 million+ tournament happening. It's only 2 weeks from now, as opposed to, oh, it's 4 weeks from now. I don't really give a shit anymore, and they're moving on. So, um, I don't know. I just think I like what EWC has been able to do in terms of offering another tournament to the schedule. Because imagine if the season just ended at the end of July, then regardless of whether the next game launches in October or November, you're 3-4 months away from the return to competitive action. So in terms of getting another high octane and lucrative tournament into the CDL schedule, I like EWC and what it offers and its willingness to experiment with the rules and whatnot. But um, yeah, I don't know if there's really like a correct answer in terms of when it should be, when it's best to fit into the schedule, all that.
I actually wanted to ask you this because obviously you're a big League fan, and the way the League of Legends schedule is set up is that you have obviously like these regional leagues, and they're kind of battling it out to get eventually the world spots at the end of the season. They have different splits, so it's unlike the CDL where it's just one season. But do you like that in League there's MSI in the middle of the year, and then you get obviously the big World Championship event at the end of the season? Would that be better in Call of Duty? Obviously, it's not going to happen because EWC in this case, like they're staking out ground in July and August, so they're not going to move it. Like even for like Call of Duty is not going to move the
Yeah.
needle or whatever. But like just a hypothetical, would you prefer something where maybe after Major 2, there's uh like a week off, and then you have this $1-2 million event in the middle of the season, and then you have the rest of the season and then champs?
I think champs being the final tournament of the year would be the best case scenario. Like you said, I don't think that's going to be the case anymore though,
Mm-hmm.
with what the block EWC has, blocked off in the yearly calendar. The biggest difference between League and League actually added a third international tournament at the begin. They're doing three splits per region as of last year. So like it's split one is what's about to start in January. Then I forget what it's either like first stand or last stand or something like that is the first international tournament. Then it goes split two, MSI, split three, Worlds. So they added an international tournament, but that's the big indicator there is like you're playing these regional matches to get the chance to play internationally, and in League, China and Korea dominate international play. So for the other regions, it's a chance to play against the best teams and the best players in the world. Um, Before potentially going to the World Championship. And COD, the best players in the world are playing in the CDL. They don't have that regional thing.
Mm-hmm.
The one thing I will say, and it's been a community topic for many years now at this point. People, I remember Crone like years ago posting like a uh, um I can't think of the word I'm trying to think of, but like just a post trying to draw conversation on the topic is like a COD World Cup where the teams are, U.S.,
Yeah.
Canada, and more of a soccer-esque World Cup based on countries and nationalities and that sort of thing. I think that would be something they could do in the middle of the season, and that would be really cool. I think that's a pipe dream and probably never going to happen, but I think that would be the only way that COD could implement something mid-season and have it actually be something different than just another tournament, which effectively that's what EWC is, just basically another tournament, but the prize pool is elevated.
Yeah, I think something like I don't like that EWC is at the end of the season because it does. If it was in the middle of the season, it would have a lot more importance in my mind because these teams would be still ramping up to the ultimate goal of the World Championship rather than kind of on a come down from that World Championship, like they have the high or like the really low if they didn't win, and then then they have like 2 weeks or 3 weeks off, and then they go to Saudi Arabia and they play this tournament, which obviously has a ton of money involved. The prestige, though, we talked about last year, is not nearly the same. Like the World Championship, no matter how much money is being offered, is so much more valuable to a player's career and legacy than the Esports World Cup, even if the World Cup, it can set these players up for life a lot more effectively than Worlds can or for champs in Call of Duty, which I guess is the case with everything. I think it's interesting that this is the way things have kind of shaken out. I wonder if the CDL would ever think to extend their season, not push it back. Please do not push your season back because I will lose my mind. But like we have talked about like how much time in between seasons the CDL has had where they start in December and they end obviously in July. That's a 8-month season. So they have effectively 4 months off until the next season. This is not football or basketball or baseball or whatever where you need your body to rest for an extended period of time typically to feel refreshed, ready to go. This is more of a mental thing. And certainly they do need a break. They need breaks to not get burnt out, which they already do. But like there needs to be some kind of off season. I think 4 months is kind of pushing it though. Like that's pretty incredible to think about, especially when the NBA, for example, has a 4-month off season and they play 82 games and are traveling a lot. And I just think that's kind of excessive for Call of Duty. So I wonder if the CDL would ever think about just extending their season so World Cup would be inside of the season rather than 2 or 3 weeks afterward. Like if, let's say, before Major 4, or before Major 4 qualifiers, for example, you have that World Cup break, and then you get the final stretch of the CDL season for Major 4 qualifiers, Major 4, and then champs, let's say in September or October, whatever. I really don't care when it is. I wonder if that would ever happen or if it's just we're kind of set up right now for December to July or December to June in some cases for the CDL. I don't know if that'll ever happen. I think it's interesting to think about. It's just I don't know when the CDL would ever think to change radically with their schedule, even though I don't think their schedule is very effective. And I think just the nature of it kind of dims down some of the excitement a lot of times. And we've talked about that before, like where there are just like really random like 2-week breaks. And it's like, why is there a 2-week break here? Like this doesn't even make a lot of sense. But yeah, EWC August 3rd to 9th. Any last thoughts before we move on?
Just I didn't look. I should have looked what the actual like how long EWC ran for COD last year. I think it was maybe 4 or 5 days max. But I don't think the actual dates for COD have been announced, like specifically
Yeah,
what day to
it's
what
true.
day this is. That's just the August 3rd to 9th is the range that Call of Duty will be probably 3 or 4 or 5 days within that 6-7 day span. Damn it, I did a 6-7 again.
Yeah. So, and obviously that'll be in Saudi Arabia, and the times will be very
Yep.
weird for the American audiences. So, I don't I typically do not watch a ton of EWC. Like I catch up on it, but it's not something I set an alarm to and I'm like, oh man, I'm ready. Like to me, it just is kind of like it's just another tournament, and I guess it plays into like obviously worlds or champs. I don't know. I'm just in the League of Legends thing right now, but champs,
Big fan.
yeah, certainly. Champs used to be in March, as we all know, and then we'd have like the rest of the 4 or 5 months after that. And I think the last year that champs was in March, MLG did their MLG World Championship or Global Championship. Do you remember that? Like, I think that was Black Ops 3, and I want to say Envy won that. Like the John Apathy Slasher JCap Envy. They did like, what was it? MLG World Championship.
I do not remember. The only thing I remember is like they called it World's Finals for the end of AW.
I think it was that.
And that Optic won that was against the Denial team that was like Hook and Temp and Slasher and Classic or Replays, something like that.
Yeah, so that was kind of like, in a way, that was what EWC, even that felt a lot more prestigious because like that was building up to something. Whereas EWC is just kind of like, all right, like here you go. Like you have these 4 challengers teams that to CDL audiences, they've never seen them before. They've seen some of the players, but they didn't see those teams and how they qualified. And then some of the rosters are different. Part of that is also they changed the team names for EWC, which really annoys me. Like I prefer those team names in the EWC, but then they flip back and I get really annoyed about it. But yeah, I think of stuff like that where we used to have champs in the middle of the year and then we'd have something at the end of the year typically to kind of be like, here's your send off for whatever this game is.
They did at the end of Black Ops 4. It was in Miami, I think. I forget what it was called though, but it was like we had the last major, and then it was basically like the finals, like CWL finals, and then champs. And I only remember it because there was an all-star game, either between or at the finals or between the worlds and finals. I can't really remember, but there was something in that. I think that was the last time we had something that was like, different than just a quote unquote major before champs.
Yeah, I mean that's I think it'd be interesting if we brought back playoffs and then made the World Championship a bigger event again. Like if we had what the World Championship is now, right? Where I think you should just put all 12 teams in it, and because who cares at this point? And then you have the World Championship where you open it up to 24 or 32 teams again, and then you really get cooking. And I think that also gives all these other players something to strive for at the end of the season where, whether you're in Finland or Australia or Venezuela or whatever, like you do have something to kind of look forward to.
I think the big thing there is the different. I feel like for the CDL, Activision, Microsoft, etc., like the higher ups at the CDL, since the implementation of the Call of Duty League, they have looked at champs as the quote unquote playoffs, and and other fans don't. We just think of champs as champs. But probably the best middle ground is we get Bush and Omit and some challengers teams in through expansion, 16 team CDL. Playoffs is 16 teams, and that breaks down to either 8 or 12 teams for champs. I think that's probably a pretty good middle ground, but
Omit, War, Bush.
I was gonna say Stallions, but they wouldn't let that because FaZe.
Yeah, probably.
I mean, they might let Stallions be the name of it, but like Zuma would have to leave FaZe, I'd assume, or I don't know how that would work.
Who's the top challengers team right
now? Five Fears is decent, I think. I know that name.
Next threat, Sensors owning a.
There you go.
Sensors on the team to get back in the CDL.
Winning champs.
All right, I think we should move on. We have the final week of the Major 1 qualifiers that start on Friday, January 23rd, where we have 8 matches, we have 8 matches left. This will effectively decide a ton of the seeding because as we talked about last week, basically there's been like very little decided officially, because we have a bunch of ties around the standings. I'm trying to pull them up real quick. So we have, I'll just say it before because I think it's important to keep in mind as we talk about these matches. We have a 3-way tie for first place with the Falcons, Optic, and FaZe. They're all 4-2. They all have a 13-10 map count, but the Falcons have the tiebreaker in an event that those 3 teams specifically tie for first. Then you have Toronto, Paris, LAT, Carolina, Miami, and Boston. So you have a 6-way tie for fourth place. They all have 3 wins. Miami and Boston are 3-3, while the other 4 teams are 3-2. So obviously that gives an advantage to Toronto, Paris, LAT, and Carolina, because they could, in theory, go 5-2 in this. That won't happen. But then, yeah, obviously Miami and Boston, that is essentially a tie for 8th place, which will be the final spot in the winners bracket. And then you have G2 Minnesota at 2-4. They're in 10th place. And then C9 and Vancouver are tied for 11th at 1-5. Vancouver effectively dead last because they lost the tiebreaker to C9 in that. So that's just keep in mind as we talk about these matches. Some of them are very, very important to the seeding. Some of them not as much. The first one is really, really important, and I did not expect to say that at the beginning of even the break, when we came back from the break. Certainly not the beginning of the season, but certainly not even 2 or 3 weeks ago. But Optic versus Carolina start off the week. Optic is on a losing streak, and they're the 2-time defending world champions. Carolina is on a winning streak and could be argued as one of the top 3 or 4 best teams, certainly over the last few weeks. Exceed has looked really great since he's come back into the CDL. These rookies with Exceed have looked even better than they were with Slasher. And I think it's fair to say that Optic might be an underdog in this match. I'm going to go with Optic. I always think the talent will override whatever is happening, but we saw last year for a long stretch of the season that Optic, no matter their talent, could not get out of their own way and lost a bunch of these matches that we didn't think they should lose. So I will go with Optic. Who do you have between Optic and Carolina?
Yeah, I was anticipating you to pick Optic, so I'm going to go with Carolina. I do think this is definitely, like you set it up pretty well. This is one that I think both of us a couple weeks ago are slam picking Optic 3-0 and not even discussing it more than 5 seconds. But Carolina, through the Exceed move, have forced our hand, and we are definitely talking about this match more than we would have. And I'm really excited in general to see Carolina in their 2 matches this week, because I think although they have been 3-0 since the Exceed move, these 2 matches this week should be very good tests to really gauge where this Carolina team is right now and what we can kind of expect from them at Major 1 and beyond. So I'll take Carolina here. Hot hand versus team that just came off a loss, and I do think there's a very realistic opportunity for Optic to kind of have taken that 3 Thieves loss as a wake up call and be like, yeah, we're hitting the lab, gotta get back on the grind, and sort of like a slap in the face in terms of like, all right, wake up, time to get back in action and start being Optic again. So wouldn't be surprised if Optic come out and take the win here, but I'll go with the hot hand for now and take Carolina. I did just want to throw in too, because I thought of it while you were doing the standings. I saw Brian Saint tweeted a couple days ago that he was looking at the standings and matchups, and there's a legitimate reality going into last week of CDL matches where 9 teams can be tied for first place with a 4-3 series record at the end of the split. I think I haven't looked at the matches, so I'm in terms of like what would have to happen for that to be a reality. But if he did, I'm taking his word for it, and I kind of want that to happen because that would just be absolute utter chaos. I think we have talked multiple times in this episode that we do previewing the final week of matches before a major, and then we go into the next episode and we're like, yeah, this happened and we weren't expecting it, and it led to like this kind of 3 or 4-way tie. Never been close to a 9-way tie, and that would mean if it was actually a 9-way tie at 4-3, then 1 4-3 team would start in the losers bracket. And I know for a fact, I don't even have to look it up, I don't think that's ever happened, where a team with a positive record didn't start in winners bracket in this system where it's the top eight in winners and four auto losers. That I'm pretty confident in that.
I want it for the chaos, but I don't want to have to try to explain why
Yep.
certain teams got the tiebreaker over, like, because it's 9 ways. It's like, all right, who has the best record of these, like, against these 8 teams? And it's like, who cares at that point? Like, just do, like, I don't know, just put everybody in the winners bracket at that point and then just let them roam free, I guess. But we'll see what happens. I mean, I don't think it's likely, but I think it's pretty likely that we will have a ton of teams that are tied either for first or fourth or seventh or whatever. And I think there will be some pretty annoyed fans and players by the end of this week. But then we have on Friday, the only other match that day is Toronto versus Paris, which is just an incredibly fascinating match. Obviously, both of these teams are 3-2. They're one of, they have the exact same map count through 5 matches. They have neither one of them have looked good recently. We had Toronto last week lose to Carolina. Paris lost last week to Riyadh Falcons. The previous week we had Toronto beat LAT, and then Paris beat C9, but they beat them in game 5 and had to reverse sweep them. So a lot, I guess there's some good, there's some bad. I really don't know what to expect of this match. I'm going to pick Paris. The same kind of logic I'm following as Optic versus Carolina is Toronto has probably played better recently than Paris has, but Paris in just general terms, I think is the better team, and I certainly rank them higher than Toronto going into the last few weeks. I haven't updated that thinking yet, but this match could be something to consider. Who do you have, Toronto versus Paris?
Yeah, I'm going with my same logic for the Carolina over Optic pick, and I'm taking Toronto over Gentlemates here, and that's again something I might not have anticipated with how high I mean I'm kind of high on both Toronto and Gentlemates this year, but I think Toronto has been the hot hand right now and played a little better recently than Gentlemates, and I think that evens out the playing field a little bit more. I think if this was early season Gentlemates, I'm probably just picking them here and not thinking much about it, but I think just recently, uh, it, the recent Gentlemates performance has me thinking this a little bit more, and instead of going back and forth in my head, I'm just gonna go with Toronto. Gonna need a big showing out of Joe Deceives, and I think either way, this should be a very, very interesting series, and I'm excited to watch this one.
Saturday, January 24th. I think every match on this day, it seems like there's a clear favorite, but there's a lot of reasons to believe that that favorite
Yeah.
is vulnerable in these matches. The first of which is Toronto versus G2. Obviously, we just talked about Koi. G2 Minnesota, they just pulled off a massive upset last week against FaZe Vegas. Before that, though, they had lost like 3 straight matches. They've had a ton of game 5 losses. They're 10th in the CDL, whereas Toronto is tied for 4th. So I'm going to go with Toronto. Obviously, a much more talented team. Definitely had more success over the first 4 weeks of the CDL season. But we just saw Toronto underperform last week, Minnesota overperform, and we had our discussion on the last episode about how Minnesota's lost a lot of their matches basically like on a coin flip. They're losing a ton of game 5s. It might not be indicative that they're not, it might be indicative that they're not a great team, but they could still be like a pretty solid team, even with those losses. And Toronto just got beat by Carolina. And I'm not sure what that really means because we're still kind of sussing out how good Carolina is in the grand scheme of things. But I will go with Toronto here. I would assume that you're going to go with Koi as well.
Yeah, I gotta go with if I'm picking Toronto over Gentlemates, I gotta go with Toronto over G2. But I like you said, I am interested to see how G2 play following up on their big win over FaZe. It's gonna be I don't want to say it's gonna be super telling, but I think um, if G2 come out flat here, it might have just been more of a case where um, they had one of those better days against FaZe that we were talking about, or if G2 come out strong here against Toronto, then I think it's more of a case that G2 is looking more in line with the like preseason form and what people were expecting after some of those preseason tournaments from that team. So, um, big match in terms of what the what we can expect from G2 going forward. I think it's almost inevitable that they're in the losers bracket to start Major 1, so this is an opportunity for them to um, play another top team, showcase what they can do, and potentially set the stage for a losers bracket run.
Next up, Riyadh Falcons versus C9. Certainly going to pick Falcons here. Falcons have won 4 straight. They started 0-2. They lost 3-0 to Optic and 3-1 to LAT in the first week of the season. And then they beat Carolina 3-0, Boston 3-1. And then after the break, they beat Minnesota 3-2 and Paris in a pretty massive upset 3-1. We talked about that on the last episode, how Paris absolutely dominated the opening hard point and were looking to be cruising toward an S&D win, and then things flipped in the middle of that S&D map. Riyadh goes on a run. They end up winning the rest of the series, and now they're atop the CDL. If they win this match, they should get the number 1 seed at Major 1, which is just an incredible turn of events for this team that I don't even know when they won their first match last season, for them to be, but I think it depends on some of the tiebreakers, but they are certainly in a driver's seat to get the number 1 seed here. Who do you have between C9 and the Falcons?
Yeah, got to go with Falcons, but I do think this is more of an interesting, like this feels like a sneaky match that some people might overlook in terms of what it has to offer. But I think that for me, I broke it down this way multiple times now in regards to Falcons in terms of with some of the players on this team, you would probably expect them to be a little bit better in hardpoint than search and destroy, but they do have the search and destroy players, like Kiz and Celium. Um, and so far this year, it feels like they've been a little better in search than respawn. And Cloud9, I think that the big thing with Cloud9 has been Beans with the sniper, and S&D has been such a catalyst for them. That the S&D could be a sneaky deciding factor in this matchup. If they split the hard points, then obviously the overload would be important as well. But yeah, I think another factor too is if Blackheart Hardpoint gets in here, that seems to be something that Falcons might be able to um, take advantage of, just because I feel like with Kismet and Pred, they have a little bit more SMG aggressive on a small map. Even if Kiz is more of a flex now, like on a map like Blackheart, they probably are running multiple or possibly 3 SMGs as opposed to a 2-2 more traditional split. And I just feel like I like that SMG matchup versus when you look at Cloud9's roster, it's really just Afro, and then Mac, Vivid, and Beans are all more or less recently been using the AR, even though Vivid was known as that super cracked SMG a couple years ago. Um, so that's something I'll be looking to see if that map even gets in. It's possible maybe Cloud9 just vetoes it after seeing Falcons win that against Gentlemates last time. But yeah, I do think this could be a little bit more of an interesting match than people are expecting. But I still do think Falcons should take it in the end.
Yeah, like you mentioned on the last episode, C9, they have 5 losses. 4 of them are Game 5 losses. They're 0-4 in Game 5s. The only time that they didn't go to a 5th map was when they beat Vancouver 3-0, and then they lost to Vegas 3-0. So, a 3-1 series would be nice for this team. I guess hopefully a win for them. But I think of this series in a similar way, and obviously not the same because of really FaZe's dominance over the last few weeks before their match last week. But Minnesota versus FaZe, Minnesota had a bunch of Game 5 losses and were definitely underrated going into that match. FaZe was, I'd not say overrated, but I think properly rated as one of the best, if not the best team in the league going into that match because they had such a great record. I think it's something similar here with the Falcons where they've won 4. I think people are very high on them, or at least a lot higher than they were to start the season. Whereas C9, people are super low and pessimistic about this team, 1-5, but they have I think 11-15 map count on the season, which isn't great by any means, but you definitely wouldn't think that team has lost 5 of their 6 matches, So it could be a pretty competitive match, like you said, between Falcons and C9. And then the final match on Saturday is LAT versus Boston, a classic, really, because Boston has pulled off the upset against LAT a few times, and LAT has been very up and down throughout the Major 1 qualifiers. They started off well enough. They beat FaZe Vegas 3-0. They beat the Riyadh Falcons 3-1. And then they got dominated by Paris Gentleman's and Toronto Koi. Is the second one after the break. So that 3 or 4 week break didn't really do much for them. But then they beat Optic last week 3-1 and are in this position where they could still finish the Major 1 qualifiers 5-2. And if you said that with the schedule that they had, I think people would be like, yeah, that makes sense. Sounds like a pretty good, maybe not great, but a pretty good stretch of matches for LAT. I will go with LAT, of course, because they're just much, much more talented than Boston is. But Boston has beat them plenty of times before where they were much less talented. And I could definitely see that happening again this weekend.
Yeah, gotta go with LAT here, I think, especially after big win for them against Optic. The big things I will be looking at, I think the number one thing that most people will have their eyes on for LAT is what we see from Kenny was last week, just like he's fired up to play against Optic, sort of deal, and how does he do playing against a team that he might not have that same potential level of passion or extra fuel, however you want to phrase it. But the other thing I'm going to look at in particular for this matchup that might fly under the radar is Abizi and his use of the AR, because that's something I noticed last week felt like he was using that a little bit more in the respawns, and I want to see if that's going to be a common thread for LAT going forward, if that was just a one-time thing due to like the maps or whatever in the series. And yeah, I want to see maybe that's something that helps him continue to perform a little better, or like I said, it could be map dependent or whatever due to the vetoes. But yeah, I think LAT is pretty clear cut here. It would be a really big, mind game if LAT beat Optic and then lose to Boston. I don't know what I'd say.
Yeah, and Boston pretty much needs to win this match to have a shot at the winners bracket, because like we mentioned, they're 3-3, tied with Miami for 8th place, and Miami beat Boston, so I believe so, right? Yeah, Miami beat Boston last week, so they have the tiebreakers. So they even with all these tiebreakers, I think Boston very much needs this win, especially with Miami's match, which starts Sunday, January 25th. The final 3 matches of the Major 1 qualifiers: Miami versus Paris to start off. Definitely going with Paris. Who knows? We're going to obviously see the Genomates in action on Friday. If they look great against Toronto, I would expect them to look great against Miami. If they look bad against Toronto, I think this is a much, much more of a toss-up game than people may have expected, just based on what we saw over the first 3 or 4 weeks of the season. But I'll go with Paris Genomates.
Yep, I gotta go with Genomates too, but I am thinking basically the same as you. I think Friday will be a big indicator. Friday Genomates game, I should say, will be a big indicator of what to expect from this matchup. I do think regardless of that Friday game, though, this is a good final qualifier match for Miami in sense of it's not like an easy match on paper. It's not like a super grueler though, based on how Gentlemates have played recently. It's a very good test. It's a match that won't be easy, won't be I don't want to say won't be hard, but it's not one where you're going in, taking it lightly, and then you lose going into the major, and then you're questioning everything. It's a match you should go in with the mindset that it's going to be a tough one, that you got to show up if you want to win and take it. And I think that'll be a good test for Miami heading into the major. I also think at the same time, Gentlemates, they're playing two teams that it's not the quote unquote top team, but it's two teams middle of the pack to higher end of the middle of the pack, and should be some good practice before the major as well.
Yeah, Miami's been able to beat these lower tier teams. Typically, they beat C9, Vancouver, and Boston. Those are their 3 wins, and then their 3 losses. Game 5 versus Toronto, Game 5 versus Optic, and they lost in 4 games to Carolina. And we talked about like Carolina's just been very hot. That was the first match they had with Exceed, and since then Carolina's beaten Minnesota and Toronto. So it's obviously a huge step up, like from some of these other matches, especially last week where they're playing Vancouver and Boston, 2 of the probably bottom 5 teams in the league, versus Paris, who at their best is maybe the best team. Like we've seen them play against like top teams and win those matches either in the preseason or already early in the season. So just really depends on like what Paris shows up, and if they're at their top form, it should be a pretty not dominant but decisive win for the Gentlemates. Next up, we have LAT versus Carolina, which is probably honestly the most interesting match to me because I just need to know where Carolina is, and this is the perfect 2 match schedule for them. They play Optic on Friday, play LAT on Sunday. If they win both of these matches, like they legitimately I might pick them to win Major 1, which is just a ridiculous thing to say.
Yeah.
But that would mean that they've beaten Toronto, Optic, and LAT in succession. And not saying that those 3 teams aren't flawed in their own ways, because they certainly are, but it'd just be pretty crazy to think about. I will go with LAT, like very similar thinking. I think LAT is more talented. I think that they've had a rough stretch. I do not believe in this specific roster long term, but we're not talking about long term here. We're just talking about one match, and I believe in a single match, the Thieves should be able to beat the Royal Ravens.
Yeah, so my way of thinking with this, I'm going to go with LAT here as well. I again said it just a couple minutes ago. I'm really excited to see both of these matches for Carolina against Optic and LA Thieves. But due to the 2 matches being against Optic and LA Thieves, I think it is just extremely unlikely that Carolina actually goes 2-0 in those matches. And I think if Optic beat LAT last week, I would have picked Optic to beat Carolina and then Carolina to beat Thieves. But because Thieves beat Optic, I think that's sort of my reasoning to go Carolina over Optic and then LAT over Carolina. I just think it's very unlikely for Carolina to go 2-0 given the strength of the opponents. And it's very possible they go 1-1, but it's the opposite of what I said here. I could see a world where Carolina loses to Optic and then beats LAT. But I'm gonna go with LAT here, and I think end of the day, I am just really excited to see how these stack up. I think maybe I'm wrong. I mean, Scrap has talked shit to everybody, but I feel like there might be some beef between Scrap and Exceed, not like Scrap and Dashy level beef, but I think maybe some trash talk and stuff could be in the mix here. But regardless of all that, this should be a very entertaining series, and I wish it was the last series of the weekend.
Yeah, I mean, you get some transitive property BS here because Carolina beat Toronto, Toronto beat LAT, LAT beat Optic. So by extension, Carolina should go 2-0 this week if we're just following that logic. Okay. But that is also not how things work in the CDL. We've seen Boston beat teams where there's just literally no other reason that they should beat them. I'm currently fascinated by Carolina. Whatever the rose comes off the bloom off the rose, whatever it is, things might fall apart this week, really, for Carolina, and we might look at them completely differently by the time we do our next podcast, or we could be looking at them completely differently because they went 2-0 against 2 of the biggest and best teams with a bunch of world champion and MVP caliber players. And then we're talking about like, is it FaZe or Carolina for Major One? Or, that doesn't seem fathomable, but that is really a reality. It could be by the end of Sunday. And then last match of Sunday, which I have no idea why it's the last match, is Vancouver versus FaZe. The only reason I can possibly think about is that Carolina is an East Coast team, technically, and like maybe they want them earlier in the day. That's obviously why they put Paris early in the day typically, and as well as Miami, because they have European fans. So earlier in the day works better for the European crowd. I don't really know why this needs to be like LAT. I think has more fans than Vancouver. Certainly, FaZe has a lot of fans, but like if this were last year and they were Atlanta FaZe, would they be the last match of the day? Like that to me, this just doesn't make any sense. It's a very clear FaZe Vegas prediction. If they lose this match, I literally don't know why. Vancouver is definitively the worst team in the league right now. And like even with one win, they still have like what a 3-14 map count on the year. Every other team or 4-17 on the year, so they have a 19% map win percentage. No other team has lower than 42%, so they're less than half of every other team. Granted, they started off the season winless and they made that roster change, but FaZe should win this 3-0. Honestly, I would assume. Are you thinking 3-0 or are you thinking Vancouver actually takes a map off of FaZe?
I think the way I've been looking at this match in particular is that if FaZe want to guarantee the first seed heading into Major One, they have to 3-0 here because this is just like given the tiebreakers with Falcons and Optic, it is much more likely that Optic or Falcons lose at least one map than Vancouver or than FaZe. Sorry,
Mm-hmm.
so FaZe can just win 3-0 here and put themselves in the best possible position to secure that number one seed. However, just going back to last week, we don't know for sure what the deal was if they were in fact testing maps or whatever. But if that was the case, I could see a world where they try to test some stuff here in a matchup against Vancouver, and that would be an avenue for Vancouver to potentially steal a map and as a result potentially take that first seed away from FaZe, depending on how the other matches go. So I think this is a match where FaZe 100% win, which is scary to say
Mm-hmm.
because you say that, then something crazy happens and who knows. But FaZe should win this. It is just a question of whether they actually win 3-0 and take care of business on a seeding front, or if they let Vancouver steal a map and then it costs them a seed and potentially gives them a tougher first round matchup at the major.
I was just looking at the standings more closely, and the number one seed is super valuable, it seems, in this particular major because the most likely number 8 seeds are either Miami, Boston, or G2. Obviously, G2 has like a really outside shot at it. So it's most likely Miami or Boston. And those are two of the more, they're the two most vulnerable teams out of the top 9. Whereas, like, the top 7 is Carolina, LAT, Toronto, Paris, Falcons, Optic, and FaZe. I would not want to be the team that has to play, say, Carolina, and it's a 2 versus 7 or maybe even LAT 2 versus 7. Like that doesn't seem to be like what I would want out of my first round matchup. So, this first seed does seem to be actually like pretty valuable, especially
Yeah,
we've seen it before where the number 1 plays Optic first round and it's like, well, this might not be as great as we want it. I think even FaZe might have been an 8 seed for one of those weird qualifiers, and it's like, yeah, that's not ideal. So
there
I
was a
think a
little
lot of
bit of
teams will be
a
gunning for it this year or this week.
there was a little bit of a cheese early on in the season last year where the 8 seed won the first round matchup against the 1 seed. I think it was Miami against Optic at Major 1 and then Boston against LAT at Major 2 last year. Um,
Sounds about right.
Pretty sure it happened at least twice last year. So maybe the 1 seed is a curse, and maybe FaZe is looking at that and like, yeah, let's throw some throw some darts at the map pool here and maybe let Vancouver's take one so we don't get that 1 seed. But I don't think that's the case.
Yeah, and FaZe also has the like when they go into a major like poorly, that major typically does not go super well for them. So I think they really should be aiming for just complete dominance and as much
Yep.
momentum as they can get heading into Major 1, which is set to begin on January 29th. So that will be Thursday, January 29th. And that goes throughout the weekend. That's in like the Dallas Fort Worth area, and it's hosted by Optic. So I'm interested. I think this is like I really like talking about the ends of the major qualifiers because we get these matches where you can see clearly how important it is if this team wins or if this team loses versus
Yep.
week 1 or week 2 where you're like, well, you can always make it up on the back end, and sometimes you can, sometimes you can't. But that's kind of the mentality I think, even for some of these players, probably is that it doesn't seem nearly as important in the early stages of these qualifiers. And then that final week, it's like, holy shit, we really need to win this match against whoever. And it's pretty much like the most vital thing that you can do at that given moment. So obviously, we'll talk more about these matches and everything that happened this weekend. Next week, our pick'em so far, just to kind of update people. You are 21-13 on the season. I'm 20-14, and Tremor is winless on the year. We will be back. We haven't worked out yet exactly when our next show will be. We're both supposed to get like a ton of snow, like more than a foot of snow this weekend. So and I will be out of town and hopefully getting back into town safely. I don't know, like I might have to work around the schedule because of the snowstorm. And then obviously we have our Major 1 preview show sometime next week. We might combine the recap of the final week of the qualifiers and the Major 1 preview into just one show. We might do back-to-back days. Hopefully the plan is to at least do the preview show on Tuesday, to do the live version of the preview show on Tuesday. So the podcast will be up on Wednesday morning. And then that gives people an entire full day on Wednesday and then even part of Thursday to listen or watch that podcast and hear our beautiful voices for probably an hour and 30, hour and 45. The preview shows are typically quite long for us, even though we've been doing long shows very recently as well. But yeah, the plan is to be determined, but we will certainly be back by Tuesday to talk about Call of Duty, whether it's these matches or to talk about Major 1 as a whole. Please tune in then. I love the preview shows. Bink loves the preview shows. Those are really fun. They're a lot more freeform because we don't have matches typically to talk
Yep.
about. Like we talk about the winner's bracket, and then we're like, maybe if we pick chalk, and then we'll talk about the loser's bracket, but then everything else is kind of just like freewheeling and dealing. So please tune in. It'll definitely be either Monday or Tuesday when we do that, and you can tune in on YouTube or Twitch. You can go to our YouTube channel. Please subscribe. We're at 276 subscribers on that YouTube channel. You can also follow us on Twitch, twitch.tv/Ego Chall Podcast. Like I mentioned, I think on the last 2 shows, we're trying to get to affiliate status. So we're pretty close to that. So hopefully in the next few weeks, you could even subscribe to the Twitch channel. But please follow and tune in if you would like during the live streams. Please subscribe, follow the podcast feed wherever you're listening and watching on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, and like I mentioned, YouTube. Give us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts as well as Spotify. You can follow us both on Twitter at jbink with 2Ks, at Preston Byers, the podcasters at Ego Chall Podcast. And you can also check out Bink on Twitch, twitch.tv/jbink with 2Ks. Please follow and or subscribe, preferably both, on Twitch to him. And then, like I said, next show, we'll be back on Monday or Tuesday to talk about a ton of Call of Duty and, at least break down some matches in some shape or form. I think I've rambled enough. That about does it for me. Bink, take it away.
Yep. Good job, Preston, and thank you as always for everybody tuning in. Really do appreciate it. Been a little bit of a up and down season just because of the holiday break and whatever. But I feel like we're in the swing of things now. That first LAN is just right around the corner, literally 7 days away, 8 days away technically now. Um, so I'm really amped up for it. And like Preston said, the schedule or whether there will be one or two episodes before Major 2 or Major 1 now, that's up in the air. But what's not up in the air, we will be live at some point and we will be doing a preview and recapping these final matches. Just a question of whether we'll split it up, combine it, how we'll do it, when we'll do it, all that stuff. But it'll be here before Major 1, and then after that we'll break it all down and everything like usual. So I'm looking forward to it. Hope you guys are too. And yeah, appreciate all the support. We'll see you guys in the next one. And remember to send the chow.